Welcome to the Parent Advocate Podcast, a show where we celebrate, defend, support, and uplift the voices of the LGBTQIA community. I'm your host, Stephen Chikumba. Our pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm joined once again by my amazing co-host, Lisette Trujillo.
Hi everyone, Lisette here, she, her, ella. The mission of the Parent Advocate Podcast is to elevate conversations and reframe narratives around trans and non-binary youth to help change hearts and minds. Each week, we bring you our take on all things happening from the perspective of two parents of BIPOC transgender kids.
Lisette, we have someone on our show who I met over a year ago at our very first fundraiser in Evanston, Illinois. Not only is he the mayor of Evanston, but currently he is vying to be their congressional representative in D.C. in this upcoming election.
That's right, Stephen. Today we have an amazing public servant and parent of trans and non-binary kids, Mayor Daniel Biss.
I am so looking forward to having this conversation with him. So welcome everyone once again to the Parent Advocate Podcast. Let's get started. Lisette, what a guan? What a guan? What's been up with you?
Steven, I don't even know. Well, I guess first off, my dad's been having some health stuff, but he's good. But it's been hard to be worried about my parents and be somewhere else. So that was kind of stressful, checking in, making sure everybody's okay and feeling supported even from far away. Obviously, it's Valentine's weekend. We're going to hang out with a new family we met out here that has a trans kiddo that's from your end of the world, actually. They're from New Jersey originally. So that's going to be fun. Oh, I made Jose take me to go see Wuthering Heights in Spanish yesterday. The adaptation, because I was really curious about what her take was going to be. And it was problematic. People always think it's a book about romance, and really it's a book about race and class. And so when the lights came on and I saw girlies crying, I was like, that ain't the kind of love you want anyway. And you don't want to be a Katie either. But neither here nor there. It was visually pleasing. The soundtrack was fire because, I love Charlie XCX. But, it is what it is. How about you? What do you have planned for your beloved for Valentine's Day?
So I have now gotten Nicole into Adidas the way I'm into Adidas. So she got laced with some Italias, very flat, low profile, black on black set of Adidas. She loves flats. And so she's loving them. I also got her some Tokyos and some Japans. So her whole shoe game is about to be fire. She got me just the most bomb denim top to match this denim pair of jeans that we got when we were in the Galleria in Houston. Just something I had never seen before. And it was like a one-off piece. I don't know how this heifer found the matching top to it because I've never seen it before.
The denim Adidas set?
Yes. Never saw it before. And I'm telling you, the next red carpet I walk, I am going to be dripping in Adidas. I'm telling you, these people are going to give me an endorsement deal because look at me. I rep them so hard and I'm coming out of pocket. I saw your pants. You don't got to show me. You don't have to stand up and show me nothing. I saw when you walked up how you were repping the brand that I love so much. Stripes over checks all day, every day. So that was Valentine's Day, or Valentine's Day as it's often been called. Lisa, I had the most amazing conversation with the kids. I wrote about it in my Substack because it was just one of those moments where you're like, wow, these kids are deep. They've been deep. We don't always give children credit for the depth of thought that they actually possess. And to have that moment, it was intimate and special and heartbreaking and elucidating all at the same time. And it really just reinforces how important it is for parents to pay attention to their children. For those who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, my son was talking about the way he struggled after our wife died, after Hobbs shared his identity, after we had to move, after all of these cataclysmic changes that happened in our world because she passed away and because we had to keep on living. And the check-ins that we as parents oftentimes think we do with our children to make sure that everything's cooked in curry are oftentimes woefully deficient to really get at what our children are going through, those deeper, not on the surface things that don't necessarily manifest themselves in any kind of errant behavior, but in fact are things that still bother them. And I was just so happy that he found the space to share, because I talk to my kids all the time. We talk about hard things, we talk about funny things, we talk about mundane things. And the fact that he felt comfortable, he's 22 now, so I think he's coming into his own. But it's over a decade now, or almost a decade now, that Chanel's been gone. and that he's been grappling with this silently on his own. So I know this is our update to one another, but I definitely think it's an opportunity for parents, especially parents of gender expansive children. If you have multiple children, don't think just because you're taking care of that one child who is in crisis legitimately, that your other children are also not in crisis and are also not needing of that level of attention and support and inquiry into how they're doing from time to time, to make sure that you're not over indexing on one and inadvertently, unknowingly, unconsciously neglecting the others.
I love that you bring this up, and I loved your Substack, and I need to restack it. You know, my baby sister, she doesn't listen to this, so I'm going to share, but also reached out in our family WhatsApp to say that she was struggling again, and she's struggled openly with mental health. It's such a reminder, not just for our children, but how to create intentional care networks within our own families, right? Like, how do we check in on each other? And I thought it was really beautiful that my youngest sibling was like, hey, I'm having a hard time. I don't want you to worry, but I'm sharing this to be accountable because I need you to check in. The fact that she trusted us enough to say, I need you to check in on me, and felt like she could be vulnerable, was really, it made me feel like, okay, I'm doing right by her as a sister. And so I really love that you as a family also are intentional, because those like intergenerational relationships are just really important in our lives. And I think we come from a generation when our parents were like, this is who you are, this is what you do, I don't want to hear complaints. And we're raising children to be in relationship with us.
Absolutely.
Not as like how our parents used to tell us, like, I'm not your friend, not like that, but like intentional, caring, nurturing relationships. And I just love seeing you parent in that way.
I love what you just said because our relationships with our children are worlds apart from the way we engage with our parents. Like, I'm going through photo albums and I'm talking about women in the photo albums that were hot back in the day and how I was chasing them, and not being salacious, but talking about myself as a human being who went through human things, similar things to what my children are going through, some of the social things that I did, so that they understand that the person they see today is not necessarily the person that I've always been. I was somebody different, and I want them to know the evolution of their father so that they understand that they too will go through an evolution, and things that they think and feel and have opinions about are likely going to change for the better, maybe sometimes for the worse, but they're going to change. And so being able to embrace and understand that and appreciate through the lens of someone who's close enough to you to share those intimate portraits with you of themselves, so that you have a more refined appreciation of who your parents and who your relatives and who your relations are. I think it's really important. And so I've been loving the conversation I've been having with my kids. You have them with Daniel all the time. Like, I love y'all relationship. Like, let's just be clear. Y'all be doing it. And it's like the example, like Lucina said a few episodes ago, like, you are that standard that other parents aspire to because you've been doing it so well. And it's not to say you haven't made mistakes, but you've been very open and honest about them. And by sharing your journey, you've given parents the permission to stumble and to be clunky and clumsy, like Stephen Lighty said in our last episode, so that people can get to the other side of really being present for their children.
And I love that you talked to them about the girlies you thought were hot. It's so funny. So this morning, Daniel mentioned to me that Kamasi Washington had done a tiny desk. And he was like, Mom, you got to watch this. So we were watching it together. And I was like, Daniel, the 90s house party was peak. I was like, the front yard was where people were chatting. Some were getting ready to leave. It was who was trying to convince someone to stay. You got to the living room, that was the dance floor, the kitchen, there was food. We didn't leave people hungry. And the backyard was for all the other shenanigans, but there was nothing like a peak house party. And I love that we could talk about like those things, like how you could be like, this was my game back in the day. And I could be like, Daniel, let me tell you about a 90s house party, because there was nothing like it. That we should be able to share stories of like youthful joy and safety and all the things that we think about as parents. I'm obsessed with us today, Stephen. We're doing good.
We're doing good, but we got to get to today's topic. So how about we switch gears slightly and get into the damn show?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. That exasperation sound that you just made is appropriate considering the first topic, the Trump administration's removal of the pride flag from the Stonewall Monument in NYC. I'm going to say that again for folks who perhaps thought they misheard me when I said it the first time. The Trump administration has removed the pride flag from from the Stonewall Monument in NYC. Now, this was part of a larger federal directive to remove all flags, barring the United States flag, from all federal park sites across the nation. And so the removal of Stonewall falls under that directive, but it's fucking Stonewall.
Exactly.
How do you remove a pride flag from the Stonewall Monument? The whole point of the riot was because people were being literally attacked because of who they loved and how they identified. And so you have a federal monument which honors the sacrifices of the LGBTQ plus people who fought at that time. And a pride flag is the quintessential demonstration of pride on a national monument, and you take it away. It doesn't make any sense. The math just doesn't math.
Stephen, it's so frustrating to see rollbacks in this way, purposefully so, right? I was deeply moved by how quickly everyone mobilized, seeing a crowd right outside Stonewall demanding that the pride flag be put back up, and it was. And so it's a reminder that when you push back on this administration caves. And so people just have to keep pushing.
Yeah, I mean, I too was very pleased when I saw them literally put the flag back up. It wasn't on the original flagpole. They brought their own flagpole to put it up. Multiple hands were hoisting it up, and it's waving again. But this administration and the fact that their singular desire is to undo everything the previous administration did, just like during his first term, his singular desire was to roll back everything Obama did. It's like, have you no original ideas? Have you no capacity to simply move on? It's like the fact that this is an administration of grievance as opposed to anything else is a telltale sign of just how far we've come in a backwards direction, let's be clear, from the people we used to be. We used to be a nation that people looked up to, and now we're a nation that people, if they don't pity, they scoff and laugh at because they're like, yeah, America is not so great. And it's because of things like this, petty, stupid, simple, ignorant things like this.
Well, Stephen, in another sign of stupidity and just how disconnected from reality the GOP is, the GOP representative from Tennessee now wants an inquiry opened into Bad Bunny's halftime show to investigate gay sexual acts.
Lisa, I need you to stop making shit up for our show. Our show is salacious enough without you having to make up topics for us to talk about. I know you lying.
I wish I was Stephen, but he saw those baddies grinding near the pickup truck and lost his mind.
Lisa, wait. A GOP representative from Tennessee wants to investigate grinding at the Super Bowl halftime show instead of 3 million documents which show that this administration and billionaires for time immemorial have been abusing young girls and women and engaged in acts of debauchery so offensive that people can't even reprint them. But grinding on the Super Bowl show is an inquiry-worthy activity. Is that what you're saying?
It's such a deflection, and apparently perreo was just a word too far. I mean, let's talk about joyful female independence on the dance floor, which is what that song is about. And it's clear that the GOP just wants to keep protecting pedophiles and sex trafficking and violence against women instead of joy, independence, and freedom.
I apologize if I can't get past this, because how many TV shows are there in which couples are engaged in simulated acts of lovemaking on primetime TV? Yeah. There's a lot. Mm-hmm. There are also shows on TV today in which the depiction of homosexual gay love is also something that is accessible during prime time, correct?
Yes.
So my question is, what is it about the halftime show's depiction of simulated lovemaking that has this particular GOP representative's knickers up in a bunch? I just need to know.
I mean, was it though? They were just dancing. It was the best kind of dancing.
Again, maybe we need to investigate why he's investigating. Because again, for those of us who saw the show, I saw nothing but people having a good old time at a party. And I know at house parties that I attended back in the day, we was grinding like that, if not worse. And didn't nobody investigate us?
That's right. The theme song of this episode is going to be Next Too Close. Because you know what? There was a whole song in the 90s about it. Joy, Stephen. Latino joy.
Joy.
There's not much to say around the GOP and their silly fuckery. So we're going to move on to how the European Parliament overwhelmingly passed a non-binding resolution affirming the full recognition of trans women and setting the EU's priorities on gender equality and transgender rights for upcoming United Nations negotiations. Stephen, this is so important considering how the Heritage Foundation, Alliance Defending Freedom, all the hateful lobbies have gotten their awful hands into UN policy. And this is beautiful to see the EU really pushing back and putting trans equality and trans rights onto the global stage.
It's important for so many reasons, not the least of which is that transgender rights needs to be implemented at a global scale. The patchwork of rights that are in the United States are proof positive that the lack of a uniform standard of rights creates harm for marginalized communities. And the EU stepping forward, again, this is a non-binding resolution and it still has to be voted upon by the full UN, but it is a step in the right direction because they're saying, hey, this is something we believe in. This is something we believe our member states should adopt. This is something that we believe members of the United Nations should adopt. And who knows what's going to happen? Because like you said, there is a far right movement that does not believe that everyone should have equal rights. And they're going to fight tooth and nail to ensure that this doesn't happen. But it is a positive sign that international bodies are like saying enough. We have to do more to make sure that certain people who do not have the protections that the majority of us take for granted can live full, unaccosted lives across this globe. And so kudos to the European Parliament, kudos for the sponsors of that resolution, and Godspeed to getting this thing passed through the United Nations.
I know, Stephen, for the first time, it made me feel like, okay, the EU is doing right. When you think about like the impact of the US on the global scale, I feel like the EU is like, we have to fill that gap. And to see this resolution is really meaningful for so many of us who have left our home in hopes of safety for our children.
And you know what, Lisa, not for nothing, we have been pretty much a US focused show. We really do focus on local issues, but I think with your departure and our recognition that this isn't just a US issue, perhaps more of our content should start taking a look through a global lens at what we're seeing and making sure that folks have an appreciation that this just isn't a US problem and that this isn't just going to be resolved by one nation, and start looking at ways in which we can offer protections modeled on other places that are doing it better.
I couldn't agree more.
But you know who I want to talk about how we can do it better?
Who?
I want to talk to our next guest, the mayor of Evanston, Daniel Biss.
I can't wait.
Daniel Biss is a community activist, former Illinois state senator and representative, and the current mayor of Evanston. He served 8 years in the Illinois General Assembly, where he advanced progressive causes. His legislative achievements include banning conversion therapy, establishing a retirement security program, enhancing data privacy, and championing environmental policies. His public leadership is deeply informed by his personal life as the father of 2 trans and non-binary children. This lived experience has given him a profound understanding of the fight for children's safety, dignity, and the right to self-determination. As a leader, he has taken tangible action to protect access to gender-affirming care. Notably, as mayor of Evanston, he has made sure the city would not cooperate with any efforts to criminalize medical providers or families. Daniel is currently running for Congress with the goal of strengthening federal civil rights protections and ensuring every person can live freely, safely, and with dignity. Everyone, please welcome Daniel Biss to our show.
Welcome to the show, Daniel. Stephen has talked nonstop about you, and we are both just so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited for the conversation. Thank you.
Our first question is one that like has nothing to do with Congress or campaigns, because we want to start where it all sort of began. And that is that you are a father of 2 trans non-binary kiddos. How has walking alongside your children really shaped your understanding of like dignity, safety, and what it truly means to protect children in today's political climate?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the most extraordinary journey of my life, one littered with mistakes, but also learning and joy and love. You know, I think all the time about our older kiddo. Our kiddos were both assigned male at birth, born in 2008 and 10. And our older kiddo just said to us in the summer of 2015 as a 7-year-old, you know, mommy, daddy, I want to wear a dress. And we didn't know what to make of that. like a lot of parents, particularly back then, didn't. And we talked it over and we listened and we listened and we realized, hey man, this is serious. It's real. It's coming from someplace deep. And, one of the most profound experiences of my life, something I'll never forget as long as I live, was just what it felt like to watch that child put on a skirt that we bought at Target for the first time. And you know what it is. I'd never seen my kid exhale before. I'd never seen my kid be themselves before. There's some like reptile lizard thing inside of you that when you feel your child be themselves, when you feel your child feeling comfortable and authentic, there's just some joy that there's nothing else like it in life. And that moment was very powerful, first of all, just because it was beautiful, but also because it was a really strong indicator of you have to listen. You have to let them tell you with words and show you with body language who they are, and you have to trust and you have to support. And, those words probably sound obvious to everybody, but there's something very profound about living it, about the humility that comes with understanding that somebody else is the narrator and you are a cheerleader and a supporter and a learner, and you're going to get stuff wrong and you're going to learn stuff poorly. But as long as you make sure that the number one priority is following, you're not going to go too far astray.
So, Danny, I'm going to jump in because you said a couple things that I really want us to get in on. The first thing that you said was how powerful it was, that realization of this person and their sense of self, that powerful sense of self that they have. And when we acknowledge it, just how it moves us. You and I met at a fundraiser that Laura Tanner held in Evanston. And she was like, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet this guy. I was like, Laura, I'm in your home. Like, I'm a captive audience. I can't go anywhere. Take it easy. But she was like, you have to meet the mayor of Evanston, this Daniel guy. And I was just like, okay, cool. And I'm just thinking, we have an official in our midst. So let's, genuflect and do all the things. But she was like, no, he's a dad too. I was like, oh, then I was all interested in that. Before I was just like, oh, brother. But then I was like, I'm really interested. And we spent honestly, Daniel and I lost track of time. That's how long we talked. We didn't realize that there was a program, because it's so rare. It was, at least for me, to run into dads who had the same experience, who I could actually relate to, and to be so far away from home and to run into somebody who I hadn't met before. I hadn't known through the dads. I hadn't known through any other organization who had a similar experience. It was really good to bond with him. So I'm really curious because, this film comes to your town, one of your constituents invites you over to her house, and you meet one of the dads in this Netflix short, and you're exposed to this whole other movement. Not to say that you didn't have a group or support in your space already, but what was that like? What was that evening like for you? Because I know it was meaningful for me, not only because it was like the launch pad for like all the fundraising we did for the film that got us across the finish line, but also gave me the ability to meet people like you, who over a year later I still have a relationship with, and now we're talking about our kids on a podcast. What was that like for you?
I find the instant connection that I have with other parents of trans and non-binary kiddos, it's like on some sort of gut level. And unfortunately, particularly now as our kids are under attack, it's unbelievably comfortable to be around other people who get it, other people who've walked some version of this path, knowing that every path is different, that every person's circumstances and challenges are different, and knowing, frankly, that we come to the table with a hell of a lot of privilege as, white cisgender parents with PhDs and some, fancy sounding politician job. We don't walk through the travails that many others do, but there is some basic familiarity. And frankly, the ability to let your guard down a little bit, right? My brother is gay, and he talks about, when he first came out, he was like, there's just this constant level of stress because you go get your hair cut, and what if the person asks you about whether you have a girlfriend or a wife, and is it safe to say? And, as when you meet people, the first question out of their mouths is, do you have kids? And the second question is, are they boys or girls? And there's always this sort of gauging of what is it safe to say in this moment? And this feeling of being in a enveloping, warm environment where you know that you're in a place where it's safe to be fully vulnerable about who your family is without having to erect some walls to protect your children. It means something very, very special. And then again, in this moment where the attacks are so brutal and so vicious, and you never know who's going to say what or think what, where, I'm a politician, right? And I get in front of audiences, and sometimes the well-intentioned question is, hey, shouldn't the Democrats kind of cool it on this trans thing just to make sure we can get elected and stop the fascists? And, I've got to compose myself and give that answer as a professional, not a dad that wants to rip somebody's face off.
Right.
Anyway, so it just felt unbelievably beautiful and warm and affirming to be in a space like that and to see the extraordinary work that you're doing, to see the extraordinary work that others are doing, putting themselves out in a vulnerable position in order not only to fight for their own kids, but for all of our kids. It's very moving. I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you yourself because being in public service and being on the front lines in the way that you are in Evanston, which is being overrun by ICE right now, like there are things that are happening that people who are not in Arizona, who are not in Minnesota, who are not in Chicago, who are not in some of these places where horrible, horrible things are happening, they can't fully appreciate when we can very calmly and in somewhat of a detached way talk about things which are very impactful, which create a visceral response in you that sometimes, like you said, you have to suppress because the greater good requires that you give a dispassionate response and not the I want to rip your face off response that you actually have as a person who's not just speaking for your constituents generally, the marginalized members of your constituency generally, but also your actual children. Like your lived experience is informed not only because people that live in Evanston may identify some kind of way other than cisgender, but also that you have children whose protection is within your purview to provide beyond that you're providing to your community. So it's like that thank really has to go both ways because I think anyone who's in public service now, especially who's like standing for the LGBTQ plus community, has to have some serious cojones because people are coming after us like both barrels. And so it's daunting, to be quite honest. And I know, Lisette, this is your question, but I just had to say that.
Thank you. And I want to just quickly, if you don't mind, just you mentioned the ICE thing. I really I appreciate you bringing that up because I think maybe now that the absolute sickening horrors of Minneapolis have really penetrated the consciousness of the nation, I think more people understand. But we felt here in the Chicago area in the fall that we were losing our minds. We were an occupied city. There are masked armed men patrolling the streets and helicopters flying low, and they're just grabbing people because of the color of their skin. And then life was just going on like normal in the rest of the country. And so that's how the fascists win, by the way, is they pick us off one at a time. Whether it's one race, one gender identity, one geography, they try to make it so that the people they're coming for don't have a massive wall of solidarity across the country standing with them. And so I just appreciate you naming that.
And I just want to say, too, that I think a lot of times families are unaware of the intricacies and the ways in which policy that impacts undocumented people is sort of mirrored when it comes to other marginalized communities, right? When we talk about identity documents and things like that for trans youth. And I think I only mention that because you understand policy, so you understand the ways in which movements are tethered together. And you mentioned something really important when you were talking about your brother, right? This code switching, this constant analysis of risk. And I ran a parent community for a very long time. And before I even ran that parent community, the things that were taught to each other as parents was you support them, you do A, B, and C, and you don't tell anyone. And that's how we fix it. We don't tell anyone. We tell our kids not to tell anyone. But disclosure and being out is really relative, right? Like it's really dependent on when they begin to date or if they're employed or if all their documents are correct. And so I'm wondering if that informed kind of how you decided to show up for your children, because you had this like proximity to somebody who was sharing their lived experience around being out and safety being really relative to everyday situations, because you have gone above and beyond what most parents would do, which is run for office, right? And to put yourself in positions of leadership where you can have a say. What motivated you to do that? And how do you carry your brother's story, immigrant stories, and that of your children into all the spaces you come into?
First of all, I want to just be really technical for a second because I never want to take credit for something I don't deserve credit for. I was in politics before my kids came out. In fact, I was in politics before my brother came out. So I don't want to misrepresent myself as though these relationships and experiences motivated me to first run. I was just somebody who was passionate about social justice for a variety of reasons and got involved in politics and, on other avenues. But, these experiences really have informed my way of leading. I remember early on in this journey, we went to a family camp for trans kiddos and their families that was held at a traditional looking summer camp, but specifically for trans and non-binary kiddos. And it's a weekend family camp for their families. And there's a lot of conversation between parents, many of whom, including us at the time, who didn't have a lot of other relationships with parents of trans and non-binary kiddos. And I remember one mom saying that her kiddo goes through all of life with just the kind of challenge of being misgendered and the safety concerns and the never-ending calculations about what to say and what not to say. And she said, the least that I can do for my kiddo is to be brave and strong about using the opportunities that come to me to educate others and to demystify this whole thing for others. And that really stuck with me. And so I try very hard to use my visibility and to use the constant contact that I have with other people as a public official as a gift that I can then deploy to just tell the truth about what it is to be the parent of a trans or non-binary kiddo. I mean, I'm well aware of the fact that the marriage equality movement was fundamentally reliant upon people being willing to come out, people being willing to come out to their parents, come out to their neighbors, come out to their coworkers, and just make this whole thing that can be caricatured and surrounded with a kind of sinister mystique completely banal and normal. And that requires courage and that requires boldness, but I think it's the only way that we win. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. We have a lot of conversations as a family about safety and how are we willing to expose ourselves and put ourselves out there. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you guys if we hadn't had real conversations as a family before I decided to run for Congress about how will we keep ourselves safe, but also how will we use our story as a tool to help protect others? So it's a complicated balance to be struck, but I just feel like I have this enormous opportunity to do good for all of our kiddos, and I don't want to squander that.
Let's lean into that just a little bit because one of the things that I saw as I was prepping for this was one of the forums that you did of the myriad of candidates that are vying for that District 9 seat. And, you really did lean in on the importance of providing safety. One of the things that you did when you were on the Illinois General Assembly was you helped pass that ban on conversion therapy.
Mm.
And again, I think part of what people don't recognize for a lot of politicians is when there's something on the line. The stakes are higher when there's something on the line, and you still have to act not in your own selfish best interest. If it was a bad law, I don't think you would support it. But what does it feel like to be able to pass something that you know will have material positive impacts on really a small minority of people and do it anyway?
Well, that conversion therapy ban, obviously it felt personal to me because of my kids, but it not in a direct way, right? No kids wind up being sent into so-called conversion therapy against the will of their parents. So it wasn't literally protecting my kids, but I learned a lot from my kids. And when we worked to pass that bill, and by the way, I was the Senate sponsor, the House sponsor was Kelly Cassidy, who, if you don't know her, she's one of the great leaders in the LGBT movement nationwide and one of the great state reps we have here in Illinois. And you'd love getting to know her. We made a conscious decision for our process to be led by survivors. So it was my name on the bill, and I stood up on the Senate floor and presented it, but survivors were driving the bus, and it was the most beautiful, powerful thing I have ever seen. These young people, right? They're 18, 19, 20 years old, and they had been subjected to this unspeakable abuse by their parents in many cases. Parents who had signed them up to go to a church and then go through these abusive therapies to try to convince them to pretend to be somebody they weren't. I remember one of those survivors said, as they were describing to us the experience, they said, "I felt myself begin to disappear." It was just so powerful, so moving. And after undergoing this unspeakable treatment, they then came through on the other side and dedicated themselves to making sure nobody else ever had to experience that. And they were such extraordinary policy leaders. Like, they helped us shape the bill, so we actually passed a stronger bill than most states. But then they came with us to Springfield, the capital of Illinois, and they sat in legislators' offices of legislators who didn't necessarily want to hear from them, offices of legislators who maybe were potentially going to be demeaning to them, but they fearlessly told their story, and they told their story again, and they told their story again until we had the votes to pass it. And so that was something where what I really learned from my kids was let the most affected people be in charge and make sure the survivors are guiding the process. And they were the heroes of that story.
How did that experience impact your kids? Like hearing their testimonies, watching you champion them. What impact did that have on them?
It's really been an interesting privilege to raise my kids as a legislator, right? My kids, literally as toddlers would run up and down the aisle on the House floor and then in the Senate floor. And so that that was normal to them. Everybody's got parent and the parent does something, and for them this is what dad does. And there were just a few moments where they got to see that that work that I was doing was connected to their lives in some way. And what I hope is that it made them feel in their bones that they're loved and supported by me. I think we all, as parents of probably as parents, period, but certainly as parents of trans and non-binary kids, we just ask ourselves, does my child feel unconditionally loved? Does my child know that no matter what, I'm here to support them? And hopefully that was one piece of showing that.
I think we just have to stay here a little bit because I think what is so appealing to me about you is the way you live your values as a politician. It's very easy to follow the lobbies and kind of just submit because not for nothing, you'll get a lot of money. You'll get a lot of support. You'll have money going into your coffers. And I'm not suggesting that at some point you won't necessarily be a politician who has lobbyists who are coming and, you're a politician. Sometimes you have to make those types of deals. But I like the fact that what you've done to date has been very informed by real social justice chops. And one of the things, especially that you've done as a mayor, is you have not allowed gender affirming care to be touched. You've been really protective of gender affirming care as mayor. And to me, again, that's where a person's gravitas shows up in the things that they actually push forward as policies, the things they actually protect with their position. So I'm really curious because it's not a symbolic gesture. What did it take to make sure that that happened?
Thank you for talking about that. And I want to start by saying something. I hope this doesn't come across as just too earnest and corny, but running for office requires sacrifice. It's hard work, and it's just not worth it if you're going to lose yourself, if you're going to forget why you're there. It's just not worth the hassle. And so that's, to me, when I need to remind myself of why I'm doing this and how to make a tough choice where there's the easy path and the right path, or the right path and the safe path, or whatever you call it. I just remind myself I could quit and do something else. The reason that it's worth going to the trouble of doing what I do is that I am given the unbelievable privilege and joy of helping others in my community. And if I were to lose sight of that, just quit and get a different job. That's my attitude. I just feel so lucky, so blessed to have this role where on a good day, I'm able to make life better for thousands of people. And that's the whole point. But to your question, as obviously as you and all your listeners know, we're living in this hellscape where whether or not you have access to gender affirming care depends on what state you live in, particularly for minors. And so Illinois, thank God, has great laws. And so people come to Illinois from all over the country to access gender affirming care. That's a great thing. And I didn't do that. I had something to do with that when I was in the legislature, but more of that's happened even since I left the legislature. That's a great, great thing. But then you got to ask yourself a horrifying question. If somebody flees their state to Illinois to receive gender affirming care, will they be safe from prosecution when they get back home? And one thing that we want to make damn sure of in Evanston is that we don't do anything wittingly or unwittingly to put someone at risk of getting prosecuted. And so we passed
an ordinance that says that any data that we assemble, whether it's data from our police department or data the city public health department has access to because of our engagement with healthcare providers.
There is no data that we will share with anybody who would be willing to use it to prosecute or otherwise enforce any kind of restrictions on gender affirming care. And by the way, we have a similar thing for reproductive care and a similar thing for civil immigration enforcement, and we've had to use it. So we have these license plate reader cameras they're an important public safety tool, but they're run by a company that we did not trust not to share that data with ICE and CBP. And then all of a sudden somebody would be in our city and then our cameras would be used to arrest them, to kidnap them, to snatch us off the street. So we took those cameras down, and you know what the company did? They came back and they put the cameras up against our will. So not only did we issue a cease and desist order, but we climbed up the poles and covered the cameras with bags so that our residents would not be spied on. And so we take very, very seriously protecting our residents, even though unfortunately we're now protecting them from their own federal government or from other state governments. And so you asked how that happened. It wasn't a tough vote. It passed unanimously. The thing I'm proud of was having the creativity to do it, right? Because a lot of mayors who are largely on our side, they'll say, I'm here to pave the streets. I'm here to make sure the garbage gets collected. I'm here to keep the property taxes as low as I can. And, issues like, LGBT rights and reproductive justice, those are federal and state issues. And I support them, but let's hope they get handled somewhere else. And I just said, no, we're going to be as creative as we can about finding any tool we can possibly use to make sure that our values are what actually happens in this community. And I'm really proud of that legislation, and proud that the Evanston City Council and the Evanston community stood foursquare behind it.
Good on you and good on Evanston. Y'all are some good ass people.
Thank you.
Recently, you had to address ICE activity impacting immigrant families in your city, and you touched on this, obviously, with the surveillance systems in your town. But how do you prepare yourself to lead when fear really enters a community and people begin to feel overwhelmed and helpless in real time?
Yeah, I mean, it's been unbelievably traumatic, and it is so infuriating for me after my community went through what we went through to see these folks still stand behind podiums and press conferences in Washington and talk about going after the worst of the worst, when actually what they're doing is just racially profiling. When what they were doing is having helicopters fly low over our city so they could spot which lawns had landscape workers in them and then radio down to the ground, and the SUV would roll up and the masked man would jump out and tackle the landscape worker for the crime of gardening with brown skin, for the crime of speaking Spanish while doing work in the yard. It's sick. It's sick. And that's before they started murdering protesters in Minneapolis. Although they did, by the way, kill a person here in the Chicago area in Franklin Park, and then lie about that too. Lie about that. Unfortunately, that also turned out to be recorded so that their lies were ultimately exposed. I really appreciate the way you framed the question, because there are some people who say, don't be scared. We can't be scared. And what I say openly and publicly, including in some of my most, intense moments, is I'm not going to lie to you. We're scared. We're scared because we are under occupation by our federal government. On Halloween in Evanston, it's a town of 75,000 people. There's, school district of many thousands of kids. Every child in Evanston had indoor recess on Halloween because it wasn't safe to go outside because our government was here. Because our government was here with their guns and their tear gas and their pepper spray. And every 6-year-old that day had to come home and ask their parents, hey, it was nice out today. Why couldn't I go out and play? Right? And so, of course, people are scared. What I am so moved by, I think this might be the most moving thing I've experienced in my life, certainly in public service, is the way our community has risen up. I've never seen solidarity like this. This is not the 50 most dedicated activists in town, though bless them and I love them. This is thousands of people who've never so much as been to a protest before, who've upended their lives to be on patrol, who don't leave home without their whistle, who are in signal chats that give them specific instructions about where to patrol and what blocks to keep safe, who are communicating. They've got, text chains set up on whole blocks where everyone knows whose basement is unlocked so that folks can hide somebody in that basement when the feds come. It has been extraordinary, and it is grotesque and sick that this is a conversation that we have to have, but it also has shown us what solidarity looks like and the kind of beautiful, beloved community where we all put our arms around each other, where we understand that none of us are safe when any of us is unsafe. And I think that long after this nightmare is over, when we've beaten back this authoritarian menace and when we've restored a level of humanity and sanity to our government, this sense of solidarity and activism is going to stay with us and paint the way toward building the society that we deserve.
You say something that I think that our listeners really should be paying attention to, and it's that this threat that we're talking about is coming from our federal government. It's been long framed that the administration wants to protect us from rapists and killers and murderers and prevent the drug cartels from coming in. And in the same voice, they're talking about protecting women and girls from trans women in sports. And there's a clear connection between the two, between this fantasy of America and the reality of America. I'm really curious, as you are vying for a seat in Congress, to go and be part of this federal machine that has created much of the maelstrom we're dealing with. From your vantage point, what does this America look like? And what is your vision for how you as a congressperson can help to shift the way we frame some of these conversations so it's not this constant us versus them thing that's happening?
That's a beautiful question. I mean, first of all, let's just level set here. American American history from the beginning has had extraordinary evil and violence and brutality and oppression, as well as extraordinary freedom and liberty and optimism and hope for an equitable society. Those things are both present in America today, and they were present in America on the day that the Constitution was ratified, and they were present in America in 1619. This is not news. And so I think we have to maintain a mental equilibrium that allows us to keep both in our minds. If you lie about the bad, you don't even understand where you are, and so you can't possibly make any progress. But if you forget about the good, you have no tools with which to make the progress. You must maintain both in your mind at all times. And then the other piece of it is to maintain an absolute moral clarity about what is being done, while also not vilifying those who disagree, right? I've actually been criticized in this campaign for calling ICE agents who shoot people in the street and abduct my neighbors monsters. I don't apologize for that. They're monsters. I don't take that back. But that doesn't mean that everyone who voted for Donald Trump should be talked about in that way. We have to have empathy and openness. We have to understand that there are people in this country who vote in ways that put your children and mine at risk, who we need to build bridges to, who we have to listen empathetically to, who we have to view as the people we have to find common ground with, not the people who we should polarize away from us. And I think that distinction is really hard to maintain. There's some people who have a sort of a mushy, I love everyone that doesn't name the threat as what it is. And there are others who are so sickened by what our government is doing to us that they then use language that incorporates everyone who voted for them or everyone who has sympathy for them as the enemy. Either of those failure modes is very, very dangerous, and we have to avoid both.
You are a better person than I, because I was with Hillary and the basket of deplorables way back when, because it's very difficult, honestly, it's very difficult to parse a person who votes against their own self-interest that then puts my child and yours in harm, and a person who may have a legitimate policy-based basis for their vote and just happens to be a single issue voter. Two diametrically opposed people. I don't look at intent, I look at impact. And so oftentimes for me, and I know for many people like me, it's hard to separate what they've done from the impact it's had and then be like, yeah, I can still reach across the aisle. I don't disagree with you about what we have to do and the slippery slope that, attends when you put everybody in that I don't fuck with you basket, but it's so hard to do. It's easier said than done. And I'm sorry, Lisa, I keep jumping in because this dude just keeps dropping things that are just so powerful and moving. But okay, I know it's your question. I'm going to stop talking now.
Susan Stryker talks about this all the time, right? Susan Stryker is a trans historian. She said on Translash, and she was on our podcast too, we were very lucky to have her, that if we wanted to look at this moment when we're seeing fascism unfold, and we want to kind of base this moment historically, anchor it somewhere, it would be after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, right? And so it's very clear that the Confederacy was not held accountable, much like January 6th. Right. And so what did we see? We saw Black communities thrive, grow. We're not taught this in school. Right. And then we saw these same communities who began creating change and progress and gaining momentum in that progress be terrorized by local communities, by people who still held these ideas around what kind of country they wanted to be a part of, and overthrow that progress and implant themselves in state and local positions. So I am probably one of those advocate activists that you would have known me for years if I lived in your area, that what you would have been like, here comes this fucking mom again. But there was a reality that a decade.
I would have said, thank God, here's Lizette.
No, maybe. Steven's a lot, and I'm like, I'm not gonna flower my politicians because I will make you mad at some point. But I think there's a reality that we saw what Heritage and these lobbies were doing, right? Especially if you lived in fertile states where, like, I'm an hour, 45 minutes away from Alliance Defending Freedom. I understood what the Center for Arizona Policy, Heritage, and Alliance Defending Freedom were doing. It was a well thought out plan in collaboration with Manhattan Project, right? America First Legal. There's a reality that the average voter is ignorant to how they are being marketed to, right? And so if we look at Reconstruction and the ways in which people were not held accountable for allowing fascism to come into their communities and for participating, right, in allowing fascism to take hold. I worry that we're going to see the same sort of evil permeate again, right?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
understand the build the bridge. At the same time, we are in a real political moment where people are going to need some sort of reintegration, re-education into what this moment actually has been for them, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree with. Sorry, go ahead, Lizette.
And so that's my question. I'm curious to know kind of what that bridge building will look like from a practical standpoint. That's not just hearts and we're going to move past this because there's a reality that, like, for example, we left the country. My husband became a US citizen in 2018. He waited 25 years to become a US citizen. It's a long process. People forget that if you're from certain countries. When we first found a parent support group, we actually wouldn't tell people that we were a multi-status family. We didn't know if that parent community was safe. So when you're talking about intersections, it can be very layered. And Jose is like, and I have said, how do you forgive people who totally demean immigrants and think it's okay for them to be indefinitely incarcerated, right, for cheap labor in this political moment? I'm curious to know what that bridge building looks like and how we educate people effectively.
Well, first of all, I think you're completely right. I think whenever Democrats take power, hopefully a lot of power starting next January and then a lot more power 2 Januaries after that, there will be a live question, which will go something like this. Hey, should we spend a lot of time and energy in accountability? Or is it, here's the best, I'm gonna try to be really generous to the other side of the argument. Or oh shit, there's so much that needs to get done right now. There's so much that's been broken. There's so much that's been dismantled. There's so much legislation we have to pass. There's so much rebuilding the bureaucracy we have to do. There's so many institutions inside of government we need to heal. We don't have time to focus on the backward looking stuff. Let's just look forward. I think that's going to be the argument. There is a right answer and a wrong answer to that question. And the right answer is that we must focus on accountability. We have to. I mean, part of that is just that's a basic sense of justice. But even beyond that, we will be right back here again if we don't do a few things. Number one, go through the process with hearings and subpoenas and impeachments to get all the information out there about what happened and effectuate as much accountability, including prosecutions, as we possibly can. And then number two, even more important, based out of number one, give ourselves a homework list of what we have to change to make sure this can't happen again. The fact that we're here is proof that our system has flaws in it. This should never have been possible in the first place. So let us heal our system, build up an immunity so that this cannot occur again. So I believe to my core, we cannot let bygones be bygones. We have to take the accountability, the investigations deeply seriously, and they must be the first priority. Now, I think when it comes to bridge building, I think it's fundamentally about identifying areas of common ground and starting from there. And I think that the bigotry is real. The demonization of immigrants and trans people and other marginalized communities is absolutely real. I'm not pretending that away. I'm not closing my eyes to that. But I also think that there are broad areas of agreement where most people in this country, even on the pretty far right, are just like, whoa, why are the very rich getting so much richer, so much more powerful with limitless control over the economy and politics and government? And hey, I'm working full time, but I still can't afford housing. Or we're a couple, we're both working, but we can't afford to have a kid because our childcare costs and leave policies are so messed up in this country. So I think there are ways to build bridges to the right in ways that are genuine and authentic based on actual shared frustrations. And then you work together with people and use that actual human relationship to be the kind of platform on which you have the harder conversations.
I love that. I'm going to go back to the fact that you are running for Congress. And while wonderful things have been happening in Evanston with you as a mayor, wonderful things have been happening in Chicago at a state level, we know that the federal policy is the floor. So what do you think you're going to be able to do in Congress to really safeguard both immigrants and trans people who are, once again, the targets of this administration? Project 2025 was very clear clear about what they intended to do. And unfortunately, the crosshairs were trained on immigrants and trans and non-binary people. So what do you think is different about you in Congress than, say, any one of your potential opponents?
I believe that we need two things in this moment, and I believe that they are both non-negotiable. One is someone who knows how to fight and win inside a government, and one is someone who knows how to fight and win out on the streets. So let me explain what I mean. Any candidate who runs for office will fill out a lot of surveys and check a lot of boxes. And it is very nice if they check the right boxes and not the wrong boxes. But it doesn't matter that much, because most of what you do to actually make a difference in Congress is not just vote the right way, it's organize. It's endure political pain to do the right thing. It's bring your colleagues along with you. It's find that coalition that someone else couldn't have spotted. And there are a lot of well-intentioned people in Congress and in state legislatures and in every other elected body who they show up, they punch the clock, they vote the right way, they go home again, and not a hell of a lot changes. And so it is important to have someone who has demonstrated the ability to fight and win inside a government. We talked about that ordinance that Evanston has to protect people receiving gender affirming care or reproductive care. That's an example of something that somebody else in my seat with my values probably wouldn't have gotten done because they probably wouldn't have thought of it. There are other examples of things that I've done that I can point to where someone else in my seat with my values wouldn't have gotten it done because there's really powerful opponents with lots of money and lots of lobbyists and lots of political clout. And most people would have backed down. Most people would have not been able to figure out how to cobble together that majority, but I've been able to get it done. And so I think we can't just have someone who checks the right boxes. We've got to have someone who has shown the ability, even when it's really hard, even when they put their own political career at risk by doing so, to make something meaningful happen, to change the lives of their constituents. But that's not enough. Why? History shows us something very clear, which is that you don't overturn an authoritarian nightmare like Donald Trump and what he's doing just inside government buildings with government people doing government things in a vacuum. You need a movement rising up in the streets across the country. You need people out in the streets organizing and demanding something different. That's the only way this ever goes well. And that's what I am in my heart. I've been an organizer. I used to be a professor, and then I became this. And in between, I was organizing people to go knock on doors and make change. And in the tragic situation we've endured with ICE, I've had a lot of unfortunate opportunity to show who I am as an organizer. This picture right here is me standing face to face with an ICE agent and then getting not in the picture, but getting tear gassed by ICE agents. I've stood face to face with Greg Bavino, the head of Border Patrol, and told him, you're not welcome in Evanston because of the racism and brutality and violence. And by the way, get out of here unless you can show me a search warrant, right? And I've been working with activists and organizers to build up that movement. So you ask me, why am I different than my opponents? It's because we need both of those things to really make something meaningful happen in Congress. And there are some people in this race who can say they've got the first of those two qualities. They can say, listen, I know how to get things done in government. I might sort of quibble with their record, but they can at least make that argument. And there are other people in this race who can make the second argument. They can say, listen, I'm out in the streets putting my body on the line like Daniel, organizing people to make change. There is nobody else in this race who's got both. And that's what's at stake in this election.
Lisa, I'm going to do that. After that, abso-freaking-lutely, you better believe it.
But what I was saying was there was a poll that came out that showed that there is a large population of people that believe that we should abolish ICE. Right. But we also understand that, like, systemically, right, the conversations we were having in 2016 into 2020 were around the prison industrial complex, violent policing, the militarization of police in our streets. So you see two structures really kind of creating harm and havoc in our communities, but it doesn't, but I feel sensitive about it because it's ICE, and ICE, we can justify that ICE has only existed since 2003. Let's get rid of this structure, when really it's these like hand-holding structures that help each other, right? Like in Pinal County in Arizona, we know that the sheriff's department is working in collaboration with, and in many parts of Arizona, the police have always worked in collaboration with ICE. And so I think as we have conversations around justice and systems and what we want the future to look like, I always want to make sure that we're looking at it holistically, right? Because oftentimes the debate online becomes where that division piece comes in of like, whose fight is it really? And are we going far enough for all of us, right? So anyway, That's why I was like, Steven, don't forget the larger picture, you know? And I apologize if it came off disrespectfully. I just think about, I'm constantly, as someone who is now displaced, we left the country out of fears around denaturalization and attacks on trans people and parents of trans youth. It's just like, how do we get back to a place where we can trust? Especially if we understood that systems failed us all the time. Lizette's getting off her soapbox. But I'm wondering too, not just like what makes you ideal candidate, but like, do you feel hope? And do you want us to feel hope? As I just ranted on my reasoning for feeling distrust and feeling maybe a little hopeless. You're still working towards that. So do you feel hope? And what do you want people to think about this moment?
Yeah, you said, I want to just unpack your exact word choice because I think it's important. You said, do you still feel hope even if some people feel distrust and maybe hopeless? Distrust is not the opposite of hope. I think distrust is natural. Distrust, look around. How are you supposed to trust the system? How are you supposed to trust this government? How are you supposed to trust a system that's allowed oppression to continue, that has watched as poverty has become rampant and the middle class is hollowed out and the very rich have more and more control? How could you? So distrust, I think, is natural, but I do feel hope. And I feel hope because ultimately, to me, the path forward is through solidarity. I feel hope, to your point, because when ICE was in Evanston coming after mostly, though not exclusively, Latino immigrants, the head of our NAACP and the Black faith leaders in town stood up, and they were the loudest and the first to say this is unacceptable. I feel hope because I've watched this multiracial, multi-generational, multi-gender movement of solidarity and love in the face of unspeakable violence resist nonviolently and creatively. I'm not naive. I'm not pretending that the bad isn't what it is. I'm not pretending that the good is as big as it needs to be, but I've seen the kernel of what people can do together when they do it from a perspective of love and solidarity and inclusion of all. And I think we still have that in our hearts as a country, and we have to mobilize that to make the hope into reality.
We are going to end this episode on that note because goddamn, that was powerful. Goddamn, that was powerful. Daniel, I have to tell you, I am so happy that Laura suggested having you on our show because literally it's been so long since we've actually seen each other, and literally like all the crap that's been going on for all of us necessarily doesn't have you thinking about the connections that you have. And so I'm really pleased that she brought us back together and got you on this show. I cannot wait till this episode comes out because it's another one of these powerful conversations that people need to hear about regular people coming up with solutions to that which ails us that doesn't require you to give up hope and or jettison the legitimate distrust you have of systems, but still see a way forward. So I really appreciate those words that you've shared with us. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I am confident that members of your district are going to send you to DC, and I know that when they do, you are going to do amazing things for not only the people of Illinois, but this entire nation.
Thank you so much. This conversation was it lifted me up so much. And I'm so appreciative of you guys out there every day fighting hard. It's really, really inspiring. And I appreciate you more than you can know.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me be the grumpy mom. That's like, I want to know. Let's challenge systems.
Keep doing it, please. Keep doing it.
And now it's time for our recurring segment, Allies and Assholes, where we highlight individuals and groups who are supporting the LGBTQIA community on the one hand and call out straight up assholes who are trying to move us all backwards on the other. Lisette, who are we talking about today?
Steven, this week's Ally of the Week goes to the Blade Angels. The Blade Angels, figure skaters Amber Glenn, Alyssa Liu, and Isabel Levito, members of Team USA 2026 Winter Olympics figure skating team, are dominating the Olympics. This year's Olympics already marked a major LGBTQIA plus milestone within the event, with Glenn, who is pansexual, becoming the first openly queer Olympic women's figure skater. The trio not only delivered breathtaking performances, but became icons of camaraderie and authenticity. More importantly, these young icons are using their platform to support the LGBTQIA community. At the February 4th Olympic press conference, Glenn addressed President Trump's stance on the LGBTQ community.
Hard time for the community overall under this administration. It isn't the first time that we've had to come together as a community and try and fight for our human rights. And now, especially, it's not just affecting the queer community, but many other communities. And I think that we are able to support each other in a way that we didn't have to before. And because of that, it's made us a lot stronger. I hope I can use my platform and my voice throughout these games to try and encourage people to stay strong.
The second Trump term has focused heavily on trans athletes, attempting to ban them from competition across all sports. In response, Glenn stated that this is not the first time the community has had to unite to fight for human rights. She emphasized that the current political climate affects the queer community and many others, leading to a new level of mutual support that she believes will ultimately strengthen the various groups.
Okay, I'm not sure if you've been watching the Olympics or not, but this has to be the gayest, queerest Olympics ever. And I'm saying that with my full chest because it really is. There was a trans downhill skier. There are queer hockey players. There are queer figure skaters. There are couples and thruples. There are pansexual people. They are coming out of the woodwork. And more importantly, they're coming from all countries. It's not just the United States that has all these queer people. It is all of the countries are sending their queer elite athletes to these games, and these queer elite athletes are stepping up and doing the damn thing with these platforms. And the Blade Angels are literally, they're a shining example of what queer people with a platform can do to normalize queer people in public spaces.
Steven, I haven't been on the Olympics, and this is proof that I need to just retrain my algorithm because it's been Bad Bunny for 5 days.
That's also good, though.
And so, for standing up for LGBTQIA people on the biggest sports stage on the world, this is why Blade Angels are our ally of the week.
Congratulations to the Blade Angels. Now on to our asshole of the week. Keeping with our sports theme, this week's asshole of the week goes to USA Hockey. Last month, USA Hockey quietly adopted new eligibility policies that strip transgender athletes of the right to play in leagues that align with their gender identity, reversing its more inclusive 2019 rules and effectively banning trans players from sex-restricted programs. They didn't even announce this change publicly. It only came to light after the fact, showing a stunning lack of transparency and respect for LGBTQ plus athletes and fans. This patently shameful move that shuts out transgender people from sports, it really flies in the face of community and the values that hockey claims to uphold.
It's just proof of how insidious this administration has been in really rolling back the rights of transgender people. And when I say rolling back, it sounds as if trans people did have rights already, but let's face it, they've been slowly, incrementally gaining access to sports teams over the course of the last decade. And so seeing this is just so disheartening. And it's a reminder that we have to stay vigilant when it comes to these different sports teams, associations, and the rights and access of trans athletes in our country.
What's even more dangerous about this move in particular, if we're being honest, is the fact that before now, most of the restrictions on trans athletes have been exclusively towards trans women. What USA Hockey has done impacts both trans women and trans men in something that is unprecedented in its scope. And again, its lack of transparency about the fact that the change was even made, because not for nothing, it happened in November. It happened in November, and we're only now finding about it in February.
Steven, I'm going to sound like a hater, but I find it wildly interesting that it was golf a few years ago that wanted to ban trans men from playing golf and hockey, when in reality, they're not top tier viewed sports in our country. And so I think it's a disservice to them if they want to gain fans and followers, because you and I know both that families would be all in if accessibility was there.
Absolutely. But for cowardly preventing trans athletes from participating on teams that align with their gender identity, this is why USA Hockey is our asshole of the week. Well, that's our show for today, folks. I'd like to thank today's guest, Daniel Biss, for joining us today. And I got to give it up to my incredible co-host, Lisette Trujillo, for always speaking truth to power.
And thank you, Steven, for finding this incredible guest to come and share his experience and his vision for the future with us. And know that I am obsessed with all the things you're doing with the dads. And I'm just like, I can't wait till we continue to roll out these episodes and we continue to share stories of parents who are doing really incredible things. So know that I couldn't do this without you, Stephen, and we couldn't do this without our listeners. So thank you for tuning in to the Parent Advocate Podcast.
And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, Substack, and YouTube channels. Follow us on Instagram and my TikTok, and do everything you've got to do to stay up to date with everything going on here at the Parent Advocate Podcast.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.